Hello, and welcome to Bangladesh Feminist Oral History Project brought to you by the Bangladesh Feminist Archives. I'm Tanvir Anoy, an academic author, archivist, and activist, and I'm honored to be in conversation today with one of the Bangladesh's most committed feminist organizers and thinkers. This project is dedicated to documenting the stories, politics, and legacies of Bangladeshi feminists whose work has shaped movements, knowledge, and community struggles across generations. We center feminist voices not only as memory, but as political method, as resistance, and as collective inheritance. Today, we are joined by Khushi Kabir, a veteran feminist activist, rural organizer, and tireless advocate for land rights, secular politics, and environmental justice in Bangladesh. Trained in fine arts at the University of Dhaka, Kushiappa made a radical decision after the Liberation War to move to rural Bangladesh and work alongside landless communities. Since the early 1980s, she has been a key leader in Nijera Kori, one of the country's largest membership-based organizations grounded in feminist and class-based grassroots organizing. Her decades of work connect the fight for land and livelihood with women's leadership, indigenous resistance, anti-fundamentalist politics, and transnational solidarity. Whether mobilizing against shrimp cultivation, defending secular space, or building rural feminist power, Khushi Kabir has redefined what it means to organize from below and to survive collectively. Kushiapa, thank you so much for being with us. Let's begin with your story. How did how did your early life and your decision to study fine arts intersect with your journey toward political and feminist consciousness?
Okay, long question. Let me try and be brief if I can. So, I had a childhood that was a very uh, comfortable, a very, secure, loved uh, childhood, when most like a lot of people, like a lot of people. So, I was privileged to have a very comforting and very comfortable childhood. We were six brothers and sisters. I was fourth amongst my brothers and sisters. And this age span was like my eldest in the sibling, who's my sister, was 7 years older than me. And my youngest sibling, who's a brother, was 9 years younger than me. So we span about, uh, you know, 16 years or so amongst my oldest sibling and my youngest sibling. So I being brought up in this kind of a big family and with a lot of friends and a quite free and a very open childhood. The family was I was privileged to have a family that is very broad-minded, very open, very modern in many ways, allowing us to do what we wish to. No rules about set rules and preconceived notions about girls, boys, or anything, or what we should do or should not do. Those rules never followed us. So I grew up in a very independent kind of family, independent upbringing. And in school, the two subjects I was best at and I enjoyed was maths and art, drawing and painting. And I felt that drawing and painting was something I really loved doing. And secondly, I used to read a lot. And reading, I think the impressionists amongst the artists at that moment, that time, inspired me a lot. I looked at the time of the impressionists as when art brought in a lot of warmth, gaiety, life. You know, it wasn't just paintings that were very proper and very rigid and very and that were very cleverly done, but it also brought in a lot of passion. I think that's when to me, the impressionist was passion. Then, so I wanted to become a painter, artist. So I joined the art college. My family, my parents and my siblings were still in, my father was in the government, so we were in Pakistan because that was the central government. But I came away to Dhaka to study art and stayed with my uncle. And from 64, I've been studying and living in Dhaka. And I think going to, we used to call the Charukala Institute, the Department of Fine Arts, as art college in those days. It wasn't a department yet. So to me, that was again a place where there was a lot of freedom, a lot of, it fitted in with my personality and my mentality very much. Then those were the times when there was a lot of student movements against the military dictator, all that. So that ingrained in me, along with all the reading we were doing and what was happening. So that played a role in my life. 1971, the Liberation War happened. And in 1971, I was in Dhaka, but it affected all of us because all of us were always listening to the news, to the Shadhin Bangla Betar Kendro, the independent Bangladesh radio. And we used to listen to that. We used to listen to all the news that was happening. We knew many of our relatives, our friends, people we knew well had joined the freedom struggle. We'd hear stories about who was being killed, who had been, so all these stories were coming and going, and we were part of that whole process of being in the liberation in 1971. 16 December, when the victory happened, it was an amazing moment of time to be in. And that also impacted me. Now, immediately after that, so Fazla Hassan Abed, who's the founder of BRAC, he was someone we knew. And I had, in 1970, during the cyclone, did some voluntary work with that group. So he asked if I would be interested to help him, if I was joined anywhere, if I had joined anywhere, if I was doing something. I said, no, not yet. And he said, come and help me. And I said, okay. So I went there, and it became like a full-time job. And it was basically based in Dhaka. But while I was in Dhaka, I felt that, that I was going to go back to my painting. But I got very involved with the work in the field. I didn't go to the field then. There were no women who were going into the field. And this area is an extremely remote area. It took, in those days, 2 days to reach that place. So I used to have a lot of contact with the people who were living there. But we did also a lot of reading then. I mean, Abid Bhai was instrumental in getting us to read Frantz Fanon and Wretched of the Earth, and Ivan Illich and the Schooling Society, Paulo Freire, of course, but also I was reading a lot of feminist literature. Simone de Beauvoir I had read before, but there was Anna Nin, and there was Virginia Woolf, there was Gloria Steinem, and there was others also who were, all the feminist movements were beginning at that time. So all these things, and including the politics of, what was happening and the need for a more just and equal society was something that played in my mind. And I always felt that it was not just class, but we also need to look at women and how women are. So I then decided that I wanted to, I think about a year or so, a year and a half or 2 years later, I felt I wanted to go and work in the villages. And there was a little skepticism that how would I live in the village? It was so remote. There was no electricity. There was no running water. There were lots of snakes. There's no roads at all or anything. So I felt I needed to go there, and that is where I think. And once I went there, it was like I just took to it. I felt this is where I belonged. And from then, that's it. So that's how I got from moving from a very secure childhood to going into being an artist to going and living in the villages.
Oh, Thank you so much, Kushiaba, for such a detailed answer and really inspiring answer. My next question for you is that you have spent over 4 decades working at Nijera Kori, centering feminist, secular, and land-based justice. What did that work look like in practice?
I think when I first went to start living in the village, that's when I learned what class differences and exploitation was firsthand. Because the village is not a homogeneous unit. I mean, everyone talked about the rural urban divide. And in those days, all the NGOs were, the few that were there, were talking about development because it started with rehabilitation after the war, and everything was devastated. So rehabilitation, then it moved to what do we do for the people of the country? And it was basically looking at cooperatives and the cooperatives model, which is looking at a village rather than the different structural inequalities that exist in a village. So we were beginning to talk about that, and I went there and I found that there was such a big difference from how I had perceived my life and what had happened and what we read and I learned about intellectually, but not in practice. So I saw that happening. But most of all, I saw what was happening with women. And this is like in the early to mid 70s. And so it was a very difficult situation. And I think being a woman was very easy for me, where the men accepted me and talked to me about their issues, but the women would open up their hearts because here was someone they could really say everything to, because I didn't have any uh, agenda in that village. I didn't have any relationship in that village where I could twist it and to somebody's disadvantage. So they trusted me, and I learned a lot about what oppression was, and so all my feminist things I think most of us women who think are feminists, even if they don't want to admit it. You can't not be a feminist, because if you face oppression and you face, oppression because of your sexual, where you are, and then you realize that it is, that you have to start, that the only way is that you understand what is patriarchy and how it oppresses. So that became stronger, and I thought it was important to look at both. A lot of people felt that in those days, that if the class issue was addressed, and if there was a class less within quotes society, then automatically women would benefit. So socialism was it. If socialism was there, there's no the class oppression is removed, then automatically women also benefit, which is never true, and it is not true, and it's been proven now more than ever that it isn't. So that time we were bringing that up, that it was important for women to realize where their situation is, the oppression, and to try and break out of that. So I was working with that, and so because it was in the rural area, land is the basis, because that is what people were really dependent on: land, water bodies, natural resources. So that is what really needed them. And you could see that most of the exploitation began with controlling natural resources. Who controls the natural resources? Who benefits from it? And you then control the people who work for you on those natural resources to make you rich. So you oppress them as much as you can. You exploit them as much as you can. So you see that, and then you see how the women are treated within that. So automatically that relationship became quite effective. And the area I lived in was the Haors of Shunamganj, in a very remote area. And seeing the Haors of Shunamganj and seeing the natural system that existed, how nature was, in a way, the cycle of nature was such that made everything seem like this was, that people and humans lived around that. And it was a beautiful relationship of nature, land, human beings, etc. And I saw that whenever there was interventions being done, that always created a problem. And you create embankment, or you create a block in one of the rivers because the river is flooding that land. And immediately the river has a life of its own. It has a velocity of its own. It will spill over, it will move into another direction, it will devour land. So there, you can't, within quotes, tame nature. And I realized that that was something that people needed to start thinking of. So all these, my main, I think, my learning experience was firsthand living in the village. I didn't go from Dhaka and spend 5-6 days. I lived there at a stretch for 4-5 years. And after that, since then, I have been working in the villages. So even if I don't live in a particular village, which I lived at the beginning for 3-4 years, later on, I would live and work in the villages because that's what I understood the best. So you could see everywhere we worked the relationship between nature. So that is, the whole nature and the natural, the ecology. And you look at ecology, you look at nature, you look at exploitation, you look at how you not only exploit human beings, you exploit nature and land and all the natural resources. So these things are things that fell into place because of the work we were doing and looking at what was happening. Yeah. So I hope
Thank
I answered the question
Oh
and I
yeah,
did.
thank you so much, Kushiapa. So how did women shape the movement, not just as participants, but as leaders? And how did you confront donor expectations, microcredit models, and patriarchal NGO frameworks through this organizing?
So I worked in an organization at that time. It was very male dominated. That organization is now one of the largest organizations. I learned a lot from that organization. But I was the only first woman to go out into the field and work. And then I invited some other women to join us, and then we worked together. But it was a very male dominated and male oriented. And when I worked, they would treat me not like a woman. They would say that, oh, you're like one of us. But I wasn't like one of them. I'm a woman. And, I tried to bring in feminist principles. I found that it was easier working with the rural, poorest women who are really who are marginalized, who have been marginalized because of a process of marginalization. It's not that they're born marginalized. It's that their society and structures benefit from keeping them and making them marginalized. So when I work with them, I find them much more open and willing. And I find that it's more difficult to work with middle class women because when I was in the previous organization, I was also posted to a small town. And I found the small town mentality was much more problematic, but the village was much better. And working with those in the margins were uh, much more useful because they felt that the only way they could move forward was coming together. Because your back is against the wall. You really have nowhere else. You don't have anything to lose. And so if you want to make a change, then you accept and you start moving forward. So it was much easier and they were much more willing to take risks. And so that I felt helped me understand that why collectivization and collective strength is much more important, because the people I was working with, or even if you look at any of us, if one individual tries to make a change, it's very difficult. But if you're a group collective together in that whole area, it's much easier. You get the strength, but you also have that collective spirit to back you up and take you forward. So we felt that was important. What I felt right from the beginning, and that's why when a group of us moved to Nijera Kori in 1980, it's 45 years I've been with Nijera Kori now. So in 1980, when a group of us moved, one thing we wanted to do was work with women and men. We felt it was important that men, in those days, there was no non-binary discussion at all going on there. It was all very clear, men, women, no question of that variations. You knew that people may be gay or people may be lesbians, but you didn't have any other thing. So it was in that way when we were talking, we were seeing that those who had a very patriarchal mindset, they and these were Muslim and men, would not feel that automatically, without them realizing, always undermine women, always put them down, always keep them at the side. They will not be able to come up in front. They will not be able to work. They will not be able to do this. And the women feeling timid and unable to articulate in the same way. The language we saw that when we spoke together, men had a different language, which was much more, taking over. And the women were much more in the background in their language too. It was much more docile. So I felt it was very important for men to learn to respect and work with women and give space, because you should not be taking over everything. So I felt it was important to work both with women and men, and for men to start understanding that it's very important for them to learn to be sensitive, to learn to accept and recognize, and that women can be in the leadership and they can be not the leaders, and that it's not only one woman who's an exception, but that it is that women as women. So, understand feminism, understand patriarchy. I felt that it was very important. So it was right from the beginning in Nijera Kori, though we call ourselves a feminist organization, we work with both women and men, and we work very strongly in changing men's mindsets, in changing their whole concept of accepting anything that's different. And with women, getting women to start being much more assertive. So we think it's very important that women should not always feel that society has given them a role at the back and that they should accept that. They should learn to be more assertive about themselves and their position. And so that's how we started the journey. And I'm so glad that we are still continuing that way. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Such a lovely answer. So, what were some of your hardest lessons and most powerful moments that shaped your political commitment?
Hardest lessons were when, because we were challenging structures, we're challenging patriarchy. And also, one thing Nijera Kori right from the beginning is we are a very secular organization. So and because men and women were working together, staying in the same center, working in the field together, unrelated men and women, this was something that was a new thing for society. And so we are challenging the structures in the society, both in terms of patriarchy, in terms of what religious dogmatism tells you is what is the norm, and most we are really challenging class structures, manipulation and grabbing of resources, because we started working first, most of all, with access to resources and especially land. And the government has rules and laws which say that the land, khas land, will be distributed amongst the landless peasants. So while we are trying to do that, there have been big landowners and very influential people who did not like what this was doing, and they tried to attack the work we were doing, attack the people we were working with. And sometimes they would feel that, okay, we can attack these people, but as long as this organization keeps on supporting them, so let us attack the organization. So there have been all these attacks on us, especially in terms of accessing land. But then later on, maybe in late 80s, early 90s, we started seeing in one of the areas we work in all this beautiful, as I said, living in the villages, you learn that whole system of how nature and works, the ecological pattern, and how people who are in the area learn how to live with that without destroying it totally. And then when you bring in profit and you bring in this huge uh, paradigm of making profits and profits being everything coming from outside, so then a lot of land in the southwest was being taken for shrimp aquaculture very aggressively at the cost of people's lives. So we were challenging that, and there we found the biggest challenge. I used to be most upset when people we worked with were killed because of nothing else except standing up for their belief in wanting a better society, not just for themselves, but for the people they were with, who they live with, the area, and for the land itself. And then when they get killed, you feel guilty that, this is something happening. But what I learn is when people don't give up and they stay and say, we are going to fight back because this is our life and we want to make our life, you feel humbled and you say that you have to be with them and use your position in whatever you have in trying to amplify these voices, amplify the issue and make that issue known. So there have been, those are the times when we felt that what will happen, what's going to happen. And the big thing is that because of the resilience of the people we work with and their ability of fighting back, never giving up, that's what I've learned is you only lose when you give up. When you are wanting something, you're wanting to make a change, you're struggling for something, there will be moments of despair. But when you give up, that's when you lose. But if you don't give up, you keep on trying to overcome. And when you make these little, positive impacts and inroads, you feel good. And you know that it's not going to last forever because something else is going to come. But you recognize that this is what life is. Life is never one smooth line with no ups and downs. Everyone's life has ups and downs. So you learn how to accept challenges, meet challenges, and overcome challenges and go further. So I think I've had lots of problems, lots of disruptions, lots of trying to derail us from many ways, not just with the work we are doing, but also the kind of organization we are. As you said before, we don't, which is the most easiest for NGOs to do is microfinance, microcredit. And with microcredit, the NGO itself benefits the most, not the people that they're giving the funds to. It's the NGO. You see, the successful microfinance institutions have huge buildings, are huge institutions, lots of cars, etc. But the kind of work we do is not making money for Nijera Kori. It's getting the communities to be self-reliant in its true sense, without being dependent on anybody else, on learning how to win their own fight and win their own battles and overcome and stand on their own and dream for a better society. So so there are, and there will be, I think in future too, there'll be lots of moments of where we will feel that there's a big crisis and a big something happening, and then again there are moments of great exuberance because we've been able to do a lot. So
Thank you so much. We will have a little bit, tough conversation right now. So my next question is, you have been one of the clearest voices speaking against fundamentalism, religious nationalism, and erasure of secular feminist values in Bangladesh. So, how have you seen that terrain shift over the decades, and how do you continue to hold space for secular politics, especially in moments of crisis?
Now, the first part to your question, I'll just say that unfortunately, we are going through a downhill. And unfortunately, I think it's not just Bangladesh, globally. There's an extremely right-wing, reactionary stream or trend happening the world over, where anything that is, people will feel threatened that it is not not what the norm they would like it to be, out of their what they are used to and what they would like to believe it to be. There's a reaction against. And religion is one of the ways where you try and control people. I mean, there are many ways you control economically through exploitation. Cultural, you use culture as a means of keeping people in control, but you also use religion very strongly. And religion can be, if people believe in religion, they have every right to believe in religion. And religion can be something that you can analyze and find a lot of freedom in where you can interpret the way you wish to interpret. But unfortunately, those who control religion don't want that. To them, religion is something to be controlled. I am a secular, very staunch, strong secularist. And I feel that people should not bring their own personal beliefs and religion into the public sphere and force others to follow what they think is right. Even in every religion, people who are religious and people in every religion, there are so many different divisions within each religion, so many different sects, so many different branches, so many different interpretations and analysis. How can you force only yours as to be the only correct one? What makes yours correct and the others not? Your religion, the right religion. Your version of religion, the right version. Your analysis as the right analysis. So I feel that is very wrong, and that should not be brought into the public sphere at all. Let people who want to decide on their own how they wish to and what they wish to do. So I am lucky that because I work with people who are very like-minded with me, so 45 years we've been able to stay in the same mold in Nijera Kori, because it's not that we don't respect anyone else's belief, we do, but we don't want anyone imposing it either on us or on others. You should not impose. Imposition is wrong. And I realize that our voices are getting much less, you hear much less voices like ours these days, because as I said, globally, the whole trend is changing, especially in Bangladesh. And in Bangladesh now, currently, I'm very sorry to say, and I'll be very frank, and I can say it anyway without any qualms, is that we are becoming a very intolerant nation of people. People are so intolerant. They don't like the way you dress. They don't like the way you do your hair. They don't like the way you walk. They don't like the way you talk. So you can go up and beat up people and kill people. This is absolutely unacceptable. And I think it is very important that we keep our rational thinking and keep our rationality and bring in this kind of space where everyone has space, where intolerance is not to be in any way accepted. So, as I said, I'm very lucky that I work with people who think like me, and I have friends who think like me, so we can really work this out. And so I don't have to feel that I have to, in any way change my way of thinking, working, or being, or living to suit other people's expectations or their needs. And I think that's so important that more and more people do that. I know sometimes it's very dangerous. There have been people who've lost their lives because for living the way they wish to live. But still, we all have to keep doing that, and we need to do that more and more so that we are a much stronger group. At least our voices are stronger. We may not be a majority yet, but I'll just say one thing. The kind of work I do and the people I work with, I don't see them rejecting my views at all. No, I don't see them saying that since you don't follow the trend and you don't follow what mainstream says, I don't want to listen to you. I don't have any problems of being accepted anywhere. So, which shows that people in general are very accepting of people who they are. Everyone doesn't want you to be like them. They do accept you for what you are. And I think we need to learn that, and we need to follow that, and we need to bring that out much more to the front. Yeah. So yes, it's difficult times we're living in, but I think it's all the more important that all of us start raising much stronger voices about who we are and what we are, and be what we need to be, and what we believe in.
And also, thank you so much, whatever you're doing, raising your voices all the time, keeping us always encouraging, like I would say, structure. Like we really, really, really like owe to you for being the courageous voice. Thank you. What does feminist solidarity look like across rural, indigenous, and urban organizing spaces, in your opinion?
One thing is that understanding the systems and structures of patriarchy. And patriarchy exists in the rural areas, amongst indigenous communities. You see indigenous women who are very active and working. They are very hardworking. They are the main people who cultivate, who grow crops, who look after everything. They go to the market. So you think, oh, they're very, very, they're very open. There's a lot of equality. There isn't. Indigenous women are victims of patriarchy. Even the two indigenous communities in Bangladesh, where there's a matrilineal society where the land is given to the daughter, even there's still a the decision maker is the uncle or a male. So, and rules and norms are dictated to, and women have to follow in all our cultures. It's women who have to follow are supposed to be the ones upholding culture. Why should women be the ones upholding culture? So if you need to uphold whatever parts of the culture you think is important, it's both. Why just women? But I think it's very important for every sector, whether you're urban, more educated elite, middle class urban, working with the urban slum women, or women or communities in the rural areas who are slightly better off, the most marginalized or excluded communities in the rural areas. You work with people in indigenous communities. Everywhere, I think you have to understand what the structures are, and the structures of patriarchy, and how patriarchy is so overimposing, and it cuts across all the systems and isms that you have. And if you get that, then the differences that exist, like even amongst the feminist movement, if I look at Bangladesh feminist movement, I'll forget the global feminist movement or the South Asian regional feminist movement. I look at the Bangladesh feminist movement. We are not all, nothing is homogeneous. No, even a single community is not homogeneous. People are not homogeneous. They're not homogeneous in any way whatsoever. So when you're not homogeneous, you need to look at who you are, what makes you what you are, and what is suppressing you and oppressing you. And then if you come to that commonality of what it does, then you learn to be much more open. And I think this is something we need to do. And I see that in the rural areas, I find it much more easier. I find Like I'm working with adolescent kids in the rural areas now. This is our language group. Women and men had told us that you're working with us, we are opening up our minds, everything, but our children are learning a totally different ideology from their schools and other people. So why don't you start working with the children too? So we started working with adolescent kids. I can't tell you, it's a pleasure. Maybe because it's the first time that they're getting to be open. They talk about sexuality openly. If anyone amongst them happens to be of a different sexual orientation, I see that these kids are much more acceptable than I see kids in Dhaka. Much more acceptable than the kids in Dhaka. I mean, I would think that people would say that in the rural areas are not exposed to ideas, they are not exposed to many differences that exist, and they would be much more rigid. Yes, those who are controlling may be rigid, the religious leaders may be rigid, but not the kids. The kids find themselves much more open in accepting and wanting change. So I find it easier to work with the more up against the wall you are, more you're stuck. Again, your back is absolutely stuck to the wall. The more willing you are to make the change and to learn and be open to all the differences that exist. So with I choose to be friends with people who think like me. I really don't have the time to sit and be friends with someone who is so different from me. That doesn't mean I don't have any relationship or I don't talk to them. Of course I do. I have many people who I'm very close to or who I know very well because I knew them. We grew up together as children, or we have met in certain different circumstances, and there are many things that we share and we're very friendly. But they know that they cannot impose their wishes on me, and I will not definitely be imposed upon. So, but to make changes and to think, in a way that is much more liberating, I think it is people who are, those who are willing will be the ones who are the ones usually who feel so suffocated that they need this liberating experience. Yeah. So whether it's in the villages, whether it's indigenous communities, like I work with indigenous men and women on many indigenous issues. I work with religious minority like the Hindu community on the Vested Property Act, so with the Hindu men. But yet the Hindu men are so patriarchal and opposed to women's property rights. And yet I work with them and I work with the women and I can tease them and say that y'all are totally backward in your thinking when it comes to women's property. Indigenous men who will not be the same with indigenous women. So I think what we need to do is start, poking people and getting them to question their own positions where they are and see how fair it is, whether it is something that, because you are being exploited by some others, are you doing the same on somebody else? Yeah. So to answer your question, it's like, it doesn't matter where they are, it's the kind of people that make the changes, whether you're in the urban areas, in the villages, or with indigenous, or with even the non-binary community. It's not everybody in the non-binary community are the same and think alike. There are many
variations, right?
Variations, and same with indigenous communities. Within indigenous communities, there are a lot of variations too.
Mhm. Yeah. Thank you so much, Kushiapa. So, after decades of activism, organizing, and resistance, what resonates with you the most? And which memories, losses, or shared victories continue to hold political significance to you?
When you say after so many decades, to me, it's not decades. It's what I want to do. It's my life. It's my way of living. It's what my life is and what I will continue to do. I hope till the end, till I'm able to. Because it's not like a such sort of period of time that I want to do this for this moment of time. I want to do this because I believe in it. I truly believe in it, and I believe in it forever. So, what resonates with me? I think I think everything I've been saying is something that talks about what resonates with me. What resonates with me is people's aspirations, people being able to small victories that they have had, small successes that they have had. If you talk about what has affected us, as I said, what affected us is when people I know who have been killed for something that they should not have been killed for. No one should be killed, but you get killed because you're standing up for people's rights. You're standing up for something that is so obviously correct. You feel, but then when you see that people are willing to take this up and fight it, you feel that you have no business, that because you yourself or I myself, just because I have the luxury of being able to move out if I wish to, that is wrong, because the people I'm working with don't have that luxury. So my life is embedded with them, and I can't talk about moving out. It'll never come across my mind at all to move out. So it's not something that it's decades or whatever. It's my life, and it'll continue to be my life, because as long as I believe, if I stop being a human being and stop believing in all the things I believe in the values I have believed in for and strengthened over the years, every year as I go, the values I believe in get stronger and get much more embedded inside me. So that goes on. And yes, there have been times when people have tried to affect me, the work I do, thinking that that can be stopped. But as I told you, the thing is, I've learned from people that you only lose when you give up. And if you don't give up, you always keep on, you find out. And sometimes there was a time when I used to think that whenever there was a crisis, problem, I would really get a kind of a rush, adrenaline rush in how do I overcome this? Let's see, can I overcome this? What are the ways? And because you have people with you who feel the same, that adrenaline gets stronger and you learn to overcome this. I think those are things that give me a lot of joy and pleasure. And so, there have been losses. You miss people, many people I've known very close to, I've lost. But you continue working because you have something that you want to work with and for. So, that keeps you going, and you miss the people you've lost. A lot of very, very, very people close, dear to me, people who I valued a lot, and I learned a lot from them. And if they were still with me, I would have learned a lot. They've gone, but they've gone. So you get on with whoever is there and continue. Yeah. So even whatever happens, you continue and you overcome. I think one has to be an optimist always.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Um, I will just I will just again like ask you this. I know it wasn't in our like routine question situation. Like, do you have any particular feminist moment that really like whenever you're just sitting there and it just comes to your mind? There like any victories or like any particular incident just always stays with you? Any kind of incident in your feminist movement, activism, sphere? Yeah.
There are many. There are many. There are many. If I start from my time I started living in the villages. So in one of the villages, in the village I used to live in, I first started living and I spent 3.5 to 4 years staying there, not visiting there. That was my home. I would every 3-4 months maybe visit for 4-5 days Dhaka, but that was it. My home was that village. And the surrounding villages I worked in. There was a woman, her name was Kodbanu. She was a Muslim. This was a Hindu majority area. She was a Muslim. And rural Muslim women in a Hindu majority area, it's much more conservative than Muslims in Muslim majority area. Muslim majority areas, some areas are very conservative. That's also very conservative. But if you're a minority in a minority area, like in a Hindu majority area, your Muslimness becomes even more conservative. She decided to, we became very friends and great friends. And she looked at us and like somebody she'd like to be. And she started organizing women in her village. She started organizing walking and organizing women in neighboring villages. And then at one point, she faced a lot of criticism. She faced a lot of harassment. She faced people trying to boycott her, things like that. Then she decided she wanted to stand for elections. There was a union council election taking place. There were no reserved seats for women in those days. These are 70s, right? Mid-70s. So she decided she would stand for election. The whole village said she couldn't, as a woman, stand for election. So they tried to stop her. She really slunk out of her house, slunk out of her hut, and moved on and came. And she went to the Thana, the place where they were going to be giving the nomination forms, to give her nomination form. And everyone tried to stop her. And she said, no, I'm going to stand. And she did stand for elections. She lost by only a few votes. But the fact that she did, and she had all the women that she had worked with behind her, supporting her, who went with her and saw that she was not alone, so that no one could hit her or do away with her or kidnap her or anything, because they would go as a group. So I think that to me was a big feminist thing, where she proved, without having those quotas for women, that she could stand and be. And she said, I'm going to stand as a woman for women, and we are going to have half the population vote for me, whereas you men may have votes divided amongst the men. So 50% of the women will vote for me, whereas you men will have divisions among the other 50%. She lost because, of course, it was manipulated and women were not allowed to go out to vote or anything. But that was a big thing for me, that if and she was a single woman, she was not even a married woman, and a Muslim woman, in a very conservative area, and she did it. So Kodbanu at that time in 76, 75, 6, I think it was 76. 76 for me was a big inspiration of what it meant. There are women in, historically, and I've been very privileged to see women in various roles play of course, they've influenced me. And as a feminist, globally, regionally, Bangladesh, there are many women who have been a role model for me and whom I've admired and learned from. But I think that it's the women in the villages who fight back against all odds, even within their home. In their own home, fight their husbands. Sufia, a woman from Chandina, she didn't have children. She joined the women's group. She became a leader. She used to act in plays with the landless groups. Her husband beat her up. She stopped him. She then became a leader that later on, her husband would introduce himself as Sufia's husband. Whenever he met anybody, and he'd say, I'm Sufia's husband. And this is the same man who used to beat her up and try to stop her from going anywhere, tried to divorce her. But later on, because of her ability to have become what she is, he decided that it was better to stay with her. He he started living in her, all the glory that she was getting. He was basking in her reflected glory. So those things make me feel that there are women whom none of us know. Many of us don't know. And yet they are they're such role models for their own area, in their own area. And they are definitely for me too, because I learn a lot from them. And so how they learn to negotiate. One little thing I remember, a story. Uh, a man had brought in a second wife from another village because his wife didn't have children, or she had one daughter only or something, but didn't have children, or one daughter. Then the big floods came, etc., and the house got washed away. So some NGO was giving houses, and her name was put on the list. So all the groups got together and decided, they told the husband, the house will be in her name. You'll get the house provided you write that plot of land where the house will be built. It was her husband's land, in her name. So it was done, and so she was living. And I said, what about the second wife? Did you send her back? She said, no, because if I send her back, she'd be going back as somebody who's been deserted. In her village, her father probably had to give this fellow money to get her married to him. And, or if not, because she's the second wife, she'll be in a bad state. So let us bring her into our group and let us start working with her. So I felt like normally what does a normal wife would do, would hate the second wife and would throw. But what they tried to do was bring the second wife and start making her aware and her to understand what patriarchy is. So the man got totally, he felt he was marginalized because the women's group also was much stronger there. And she said, if I don't feel like sex, I tell him I'm not feeling like sex. I've now taught the other wife, my co-wife, to say, if you don't like it, say no. You don't have to give in to him. So the fact that they have been empowered to feel, and she felt that she could live with somebody else, with another woman, within Coach Shera's husband. She didn't feel her husband was a property. She just felt that in the village, you need a man. He's there, but I will live my life and in my terms, even emotionally. And I will teach my co-wife to also live on her terms, so that I think those are empowering stories. Those keep me going. So there are feminists, yes, in Bangladesh. There are feminists regionally. There are a lot of feminists I really look up to, people I've lost, who I have learned so much from. And I'm still learning a lot from a lot of people. But I think the ones that give me the most inspiration are these women.
Thank you so much, Kushiapa. I do have a last question for you, and that will be it. So, my last question to you is that what do you want younger feminists, especially those organizing today under rising fascism and shrinking civic space, to remember, learn, or fight for?
First, I don't know. I don't have any wise words to give to them, but I can just share my experience in saying that, it is important for you to know what you're doing and why you're doing it, and to believe in what you're doing. If you truly believe, and you believe strongly that this is the change you want, as you said, it's rising fascism, shrinking space for any kind of, not just democracy, any kind of voice of dissent or anything that is out of the box. There's no space for that. Or the kind of violence that we are living through now, the mob violence that is so easily ignited, is just so, it's terrible. It's terrible times. So I would just like to say to people that you start first understanding, start believing, believe strongly, understanding what it is that creates this kind of situation, and then not to be foolhardy, because I think the reason I've been able to continue doing what I'm doing is I'm not foolhardy. I'll understand what the nature of thing is, what needs to be done. To me, getting to the end of where I want to go is much more important. So I will keep on going that way. If somebody's blocked my path, I'll create another path, but I'll go there. I'll go to where I want to go. So I'd like to everyone to start thinking about how strongly do they believe in wanting the change and how do they wish to do that. So yes, we need to believe in it and not compromise. I don't believe in compromising at all. When I said not being foolhardy, I don't mean compromising. I just mean that if I see like a whole group of men holding machetes coming towards me, I'm not going to go out and say, kill me. I don't think that would serve any purpose. If they come and seek me out and kill me, there's nothing I can do. But I'm not going to myself go out and seek that. So that's what I meant by not being foolhardy. But let me engage in a dialogue and I stay where I am. I don't ever compromise on anything, and which I strongly believe in. And that is that don't compromise on your ideology and don't compromise in your belief in what you wish to achieve. So I think if you do that and if you love people and respect people, people will respect you back. And if you do that, you can, and you work with people, then you can make the changes. There are high moments at times when you feel that this is a moment when so many things have been able to be done. And the moments when you feel very distressed because you see all around you, everything is so negative. So I think between the two, you have to balance and see how can you overcome the negativity. And when you're in a high, how can you sustain it so that it doesn't disappear immediately? So it's not like advice, I'm just sharing my thoughts. And maybe some people may find it useful, but I just feel that, I work in an organization where we employ people to work in the villages, leave their families, to work in the villages with people away from their own comfort zone, away from what they all have gone and studied and thought they would get white collar jobs or something, and working with changing society. And I won't say that everybody who works with us have the same ideology, but we have a great number of people. Our work would not be able to continue to be the work we are doing in the villages. People who've been to our field areas would say, if I hadn't gone to the field areas, I wouldn't have realized what Nijera Kori is. Nijera Kori is not me. Nijera Kori is not Dhaka. The people who work with me closely in Dhaka. Nijera Kori is the work in the field, and that is possible because of the people we work with, but also the young people who joined us and have changed their outlook and decided to make this also while they are there work. So if they can do it, I think if we can get them to feel that commitment, I'm sure others can also, because many of them are people who just joined some months back, a year back, 2 years back, and they are so committed. They give me hope.
Khushi Appa, thank you so much for your
Thank you.
time, your clarity, your decades of feminist resistance. You have shown us that feminism is not a moment, it is a long, daily, collective process of struggle, care, and refusal. Your
It's, a,
work,
it's feminism is what you are. You have
yeah,
to be a feminist totally. You can't be a feminist for this moment.
yes. Your words today will remain part of this living feminist archive, and your work continues to shape how we understand justice, survival, and organizing in Bangladesh and beyond. To everyone watching, thank you so much for joining us. Subscribe to Bangladesh Feminist Archive, Bangladesh Feminist Archives YouTube channel and share this conversation with others. And this is Bangladesh Feminist Oral History Project because our family histories are not marginal, they are central and they are still being written. Thank you so much Khushi for being with us. Any last words to?
Yes, I just want to thank you for inviting me, letting me speak, and the viewers, whoever will be watching and are watching, thank you so much for, if you're still with us, for listening to me. I wish this was more interactive. I get a lot of strength from interacting with people. So
Yeah, but
thank
then
you. We need to really continue this with everyone.
absolutely, absolutely. But this is your oral history interview, so I have nothing to do with that. It's just you come and you state. This particular project just came out from a rage, from my anger that like there's so many amazing feminists in our country, but there's not a particular archive or like the emerging people who really want to like to look up to feminists, like where their voices, right? So this is kind of a, like a premature outset attempt to like to also maybe like a young feminist watching and like learning about your work and being inspired with your work, right? So I really hope that will work, right? Yeah. So thank
Right.
you so
Thank
much,
you.
Kushiaba, for staying with us and sharing such an amazing stories and your life. And keep doing whatever you're doing, and please do that. So we are also be able to like to do our stuff. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you.